Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to my library tour for 2022. I don't know if that's what to call it anymore. The idea of it, the more I've tried to grasp it, the more it has fallen apart in my hands like a crumbly creme brulee. So I don't really know if this is a library tour or not. It might just be that I like to show you a bunch of books every day. It could just be that. I don't know what it's going to degenerate into. I'm not going to do any firm categorical thinking on it until the changeover of the month. I'm just wired that way. I can't possibly make any categorical decisions on this while April is still underway. So we're just going to continue looking at books in April, and then I'll decide. It could be that I want to discontinue the library tour because the library is in complete flux. Far worse than I thought it would be. But in the meantime, there are plenty of books for us to talk about. Plenty. So we'll start off. We'll do a few on the iPad mini here. I had a moment with the iPad mini last night. Yeah, it was last night. Because in the back of my mind, I've been thinking that the next piece of technology that I want to get is a newer iPad mini. This is the second generation iPad mini. And I would like, in my mind, I was thinking, well, I'd like a newer one. Of course, if you have an iPad mini sitting around gathering dust, feel free to box it up and send it to me. Feel free to do that. But I was thinking about it, and then I thought, well, why, though? Why are you thinking that? This still has plenty of room left on it for ebooks. It's the perfect size for reading an ebook. So why? And then I thought, well, it's small and it's old, and so its ability to pick up Wi-Fi is weak. It has to be close to the modem. So if I take it all the way across Hyde Cottage to my little book room, it's not picking up Wi-Fi anymore. And then I thought, well, okay, but the books are on the device, so you've got plenty. You've got all the reading you could do, and the charge will last you all night long. So why would you need to pick up Wi-Fi? Is it because you want to check in on Twitter or Instagram? And if that's true, isn't it better that you don't do those things? And then I realized on top of that, that my phone is now a working phone. For 2 years it was not. But now it is, which means it's a hotspot, which means that the iPad mini in the little book room doesn't have to pick up the modem on the other side of the house. It just has to pick up my iPhone, which it can easily do. So I started thinking, well, okay, then why do you need a different iPad? Doesn't this one do everything that you want it to do? And it does, but that doesn't absolve you. I still want you to send me an iPad. And I'm, of course, curious about the new sixth generation iPad mini. Everyone, all the tech dudes talk about it. They all say that it's the greatest thing since sliced cheese. But anyway, we have a bunch of books to look at on the iPad mini here. And the first one is this. This is just incredible. This is Harvard's Itati Library series, where they adopt the model of their Loeb Classical Library, where you've got the original language on one side, English language translation on the facing side, an introduction, notes. The Loeb Classical Library is great. It's huge. And the Itati Library does the same thing, only for Renaissance works of literature. And this one is Life and Early Travels by Cyriac of Ancona. This is edited and translated by Charles Mitchell, Edward Bodnar, and Clive Foss. And this is a perfect example of something that the Itati Library does over and over and over again, where their volume is absolutely groundbreaking. Cyriac of Ancona wrote no book called Life and Early Travels, but he did write books. He kept gigantic notebooks throughout his life that were treasure troves of information. They were huge, and they were treasure troves of information because he noticed ruins everywhere that he went. And he traveled a lot. He had a good supply of money, so he traveled a lot. And he noticed these things. He noticed ruins. He noticed the shape of them. He sat for a long time, sketchboard in hand, looking at their ruins and trying to figure out what their original form was. He watched as people chiseled away raw material from them. He looked at the fact that they had inscriptions on them and copied those inscriptions. Carefully, painstakingly copied them. He's one of the absolute forerunners of the formal discipline of archaeology. And he kept enormous, meticulous notes of all that, and piece by piece, bit by bit, chunk by chunk, over the centuries. He was an Italian Renaissance figure, and over the centuries, those treasure troves disappeared, burned, were lost. And this volume does an unbelievable, like I said, a groundbreaking job in pulling together a lot of that stuff, along with, as you can tell from the title, a lot of biographical writings, a lot of things that we can know about Syriac of Ancona. That an absolutely priceless volume, a place that you cannot overlook the volume if you're doing any kind of research on this figure, especially this figure's very tenuous existence in English. Just amazing. I can't sing the praises of the Itati Library enough. Okay, this next one is by Richard Grant. This is Dispatches from Pluto, and it's about the Mississippi Delta. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Mississippi Delta. I'm not sure how many of you have ever visited it. Maybe some of you live there. I've spent some time on the Mississippi Delta, and this is a story about a couple, a guy and his girlfriend, if I remember correctly, who have an apartment in New York, and they decide to buy a house on the Delta and go out and experience what it's like there. Find out what it's like to live a rural life on the Mississippi Delta. So they learn subsistence farming of their own. They learn how to grow their own food. They deal with all the wildlife, including alligators, of course, which is unavoidable on the Delta. And they meet all the locals. This thing is full of colorful pen portraits of the local figures. It's a really good travel writing. It is saved, if I remember correctly, it is saved from being condescending. Because the young couple actually do fall in love with many aspects of the Mississippi Delta, which raises it above the aren't these colorful locals cute school of travel writing. So, oh no, I was blocking the beam. Oh no, we don't want that. Here, let's move this to the other side. We don't want that. Here, let's go back to where we were. Oh goodness gracious. All right, so that was Dispatches from Pluto. This next one, I think, was from Yale University Press. Nice, big, pretty thing. Wish that I kept it. This is a collection of the major poetry of Ralph Waldo Emerson. Lovely cover design, lots and lots of notes, really good introduction, a perfect scholarly volume of one of Emerson's main claims to fame when he was a living writer. We don't remember him now as a poet at all, but he would, if you'd have brought his name up in literary society in Boston 100 years ago, they'd have said the poet. They wouldn't have talked about the Library of America volume of his essays. They would have talked about his poetry. And this volume does it justice, gives it the weight that it deserves. Okay, all right. This next one is by Tom Hatch. This is The Last Days of George Armstrong Custer, and the subtitle is The True Story of the Battle of Little Bighorn. This moves the chairs around just a little. This is not a revisionist history at all. If you've read a little on Custer or Little Bighorn and you think you know the story, you know the story. This doesn't set the world on fire with new and revisionist thinking about, but it is still a dramatic story. I mean, it's a dramatic story anyway. It's well done in this book. It's well told. I have yet to read an account of the Battle of Little Bighorn that doesn't quickly have you rooting for Custer to die. So, and this is, I don't think, is any different. I think Nathaniel Philbrick's account is probably the one that comes closest to that. But to be where you have no business being, to attack the people that you've been harrying and harassing, to ignore consistent reports that you are riding against a force that outnumbers you 5-1, to ignore that consistently, or to hear it, take it on board and think, well, but I'm white. So the further along the story goes, the more you're hoping they all get wiped out. This next one is from years ago. This is a novel called Me by Tomoyuki Hoshino, and it's translated by, I can almost make this out, Gandia de Wolf. This is what it looks like. It's Japanese fiction, contemporary Japanese fiction. And it starts off, it springboards from a thing that was happening back when this came out. I think it was around 2012, something like that. A cell phone scam that some of you might remember. It was the talk of the news, and that was a headline in Time magazine and whatnot, where a person, it was targeted, I think, to the elderly, where they get a cell phone call that just says, "It's me. Hello, it's me. Hi, it's me. And I desperately need help. I need you to wire money." And they're sort of counting on the fact that the recipient of the message, of the scam, won't ask. They'll just say, well, there's only one person, my beloved granddaughter or whatever is the only person who would say, hello, it's me. So it must be real. Only that's just a springboard for this book. The book is kind of clever. It's a little bit limply told. that could be the translation, but so much contemporary Japanese fiction, the word I would use for it is lifeless. Zombie fiction is what I often refer to it as. So much of it is that way that I am reluctant to blame the translators of any of these things. But in this case, the main character accidentally finds a phone and decides to try that scam. He calls one of the contacts, says, "Hey, it's me. Can you wire me a ton of money?" And when he gets home, the elderly relative that he scammed is living in his house and thinks he really is the grandson or son or whatever it was that wanted the money. And not only that, but his own parents have someone in their house that they also think is their son, who also scammed them. It becomes much cleverer than it starts out to be, but the writing never does anything but just sit there. It's just the ideas that keep coming. It was entertaining to read, but me and contemporary Japanese fiction, we're going to have a reckoning one of these days. Then this next one is by Kirk Lynn. I think this was a debut. It's called Rules for Werewolves. And I think one of the psychological specters overhanging this book was the rash of property foreclosures in the wake of the Great Recession. If I've got the timetable right for this book, I think that's that's one of the things haunting this book. One way or another, this is about a pack of feral people, feral humans who go from one abandoned home to another. That's where they live. Those are sort of the locations of their informal society, is foreclosed homes, abandoned homes that people walked away from because their mortgage is suddenly Mount Everest or whatever. This informal group wanders from one place to another like that. Also vacation homes. Which I remember when I read this, I thought this was fairly well done as a debut. I don't know that I've heard from Kirk Lynn since, but maybe I have and just have forgotten. But I remember when I was reading this, I was remembering stories that I heard in Hawaii about informal groups of people who very carefully, very politely, no property damage, do go from one abandoned mega vacation home to another in the course of the off-season. Often these homes are minimally secured. Often they are extremely opulent. Often their utilities are paid for year-round, even when no one's there, not even cleaning staff. And I don't know how much of that is Hawaiian urban legend, but I was thinking of that when I was reading this book, and I kind of liked it. It tries to gin up more of a plot than that towards the end, and I don't think that worked very well, but that's a very first novel type thing. Okay, this next one is a big biography. I really wish I still had it. Very good, definitive, in fact. This is Bradley Burzer's biography of the American conservative Russell Kirk, who was a raconteur and something of a cod intellectual and noxious in a lot of ways, but also lovable in a lot of ways, and the founder of modern American conservatism until modern American conservatism caught rabies, foamed at the mouth, and died in a hospital about 6 years ago. There is no such thing as modern American conservative anymore. There is no such thing anymore. It's like the Tory party or the Whig party or whatever. It still has a name, it still has a brand, but it doesn't exist anymore. It's Trump now, and Trump doesn't care about political ideology, as I've said countless times since January 6th. Trump is not a political figure. He's not interested in politics. He's not proposing politics. No matter how many times he issues a statement from the desk of the 45th president or makes some sort of parlor video or whatever talking about conservative values, he's not a political figure. He's not anywhere on the political spectrum. And he is the face, the voice, and the overall lord and master of what still calls itself American conservatism. It's not. But Russell Kirk was, and he gave voice to a lot of it in very eloquent ways. And this book is everything that you want a biography to be. The author dives deep into the archives, including stuff that no one had seen before, that no one had used before, pulls all sorts of things together, strands together that no one had thought to do before, and makes an entertaining story out of it. Of course, with a character like Russell Kirk, it's not hard to make an entertaining story. You'd have to go a long way to make this guy boring. But this is a major biography of a major American political figure back when American politics wasn't totally insane. Okay, all right, well, this next one's a little contentious, little on the contentious side. This is Shadows of Self by Brandon Sanderson himself. This is a Mistborn story. This takes place, I think, hundreds of years after the original Mistborn trilogy, which everybody and his brother told me I had to read, so I did. I got a box set of the original Mistborn trilogy and read it, and I didn't love it. I thought it was good, consistently entertaining, but very lazy, very easy. And Brandon Sanderson rabid fans did not want to hear that. They did not want to hear that from me. And some of them insisted, get on the list to the publisher and get this next book. Get the next Mistborn book, the one right after the Mistborn trilogy. So I did. And things have changed in this book. Technology is encroaching on the fantasy land of the Mistborn trilogy, and the characters in this book have to deal with that while also wielding the kind of magic that exists in the Mistborn world. Wasn't wild about this either. Didn't hate it. Didn't even dislike it. But to me, it just sat there. I eventually, sort of shamefacedly broke that news to the Brandon Sanderson fanatics that I knew, and they said, "All right, well, there's no hope for you. Can I have the book?" But I still read the Stormlight archives and liked them. Okay. All right. Then we have a Louis L'Amour novel. Some of you are going to want to saddle up for June on the Range. We're just a little ways out from June on the Range, a new BookTube event where we concentrate on Westerns. Or we read Westerns in the month of June. And this is The Sixth Shotgun by Louis L'Amour, with a little boy on the cover. A little boy on the cover. Are you lost, my little teen gunslinger? Do you need someone to help you slap leather? And this is an interesting book because Louis L'Amour didn't write a novel called The Sixth Shotgun. Instead, this is two stories that he submitted for magazine publication, I think. And both of the stories in this were chopped up and rounded off and resized to fit the space the editor had available. And eventually, down the line, Louis L'Amour decided, wouldn't it be nice to get out the full versions of those two stories and put them in a book, not abridged, and not just the available to the people who read those magazines. Magazines are long gone, I'm sure. But here's the book. I don't think I have a paperback of this one or even an ebook, but I will be sampling some Louis L'Amour for June on the Range. There's no way around that. There's no way not to do that. I don't know if I'll be sampling. I don't know if I'll be able to find this fresh-faced wee thing and see whether his cows need poking. Oh, very good. Then we have John Floyd. I wish I had this book still. This is The Mind of an American Revolutionary, and it is a biography of Robert Morris. You might be thinking, American Revolution? Robert Morris? Who's Robert Morris? I don't know that name, and there's a reason for that. If you don't know that name, there's a reason for that. Think back to Shakespeare in Love, the great movie Shakespeare in Love, right? Where the guy who's putting on the plays is being terrorized by a local moneylender because he's behind in his payments. He's being tortured, and he's told, I know, I have a great product in hand. It's going to rake in the money. And the moneylender thinks, all right, okay, tell me a little about it. Do you think it's going to work? And when Ben Affleck and his swashbuckling colleagues, who are the bulk of the acting troupe, arrive from the provinces, remember the scene where Ben Affleck bursts open the door and says, huzzah! When he encounters the moneylender's right there, and he's trying to be imperious, but there's no way to do it with the swashbuckling character that Ben Affleck is portraying. Affleck turns on him and says, who are you? And the moneylender looks at him sheepishly and says, I'm the money. That's Robert Morris. If that's exactly what would happen if you did a Shakespeare in Love version of the American Revolution, Thomas Jefferson and John Hancock would kick the door up and say, huzzah! And when they wheeled on Robert Morris, he would say, I'm the money. He was the money far more than Hancock, he was extremely wealthy, and he underwrote a lot of the American Revolution. There are some very key parts of it that could not have happened without him and the Livingstons. And this book is really good on that subject. I don't know why I got rid of it. It's an American Revolutionary biography to have, and I don't at the moment have it. Oh my, okay, this is a romance. Those of you, this is called True to the Law by the great Joe Goodman. Oh my, these Bitterman Western novels are incredibly good, just incredibly good. She's so good at doing what she does here. This one involves a wealthy guy who's obviously not completely on the up and up, who goes to our hero and says, I've lost a young woman. I need you to find her and what she has in her possession. And you don't need to know anything more about it than what I'm willing to pay you. And you can tell the story that evolves from that. That's the opening premise. But the thing I love about Joe Goodman's novels is how deep they are, how there's so much in them. You know, you can get away with writing a kind of a quick, frothy romance, and she doesn't do that. These anything by her, if you're dipping your toes in the romance pool, anything by her is worth getting. These Bitterman novels and also Sarah at the Bookish Knitter, those two things together pretty much won me over to the world of contemporary westerns. I guess this would count for June on the Range as well. I should see if I still have a copy of any Joe Goodman. I hope I do. Okay. All right. This next one's by Lauren Kate. This is called Unforgiven. And it's the story about a bad boy in a high school who is a fallen angel. And he has a deal with the devil. He has only a limited amount of time to, I don't know, get the girl or something like that. I read this in, I think, an hour and was not impressed by any part of it at all. So the less said, the better. And then we can finish up with a biography. But the Russell Kirk biography was definitive, deep, rich, broad, and well-researched. The Robert Morris biography was really smart, really insightful in a lot of ways. And I mentioned the other day, I think on the Library of the Lost, that not all biographies are like that. Some biographies just sort of show up. They punch the time clock and just sort of show up. And they don't do either one. They don't run all around finding new sources, and they also don't do any kind of really exciting thinking. They just sort of show up, right? Every season has 10 of those about American founding fathers. And if I remember correctly, this is one of those. This is by Richard Stoneman, and it's a life of Xerxes the Great. That's well designed and well done. I think this might have been basic books, but it did nothing for me at all. I read it and then I was done reading it, and that was that. I didn't think anything new about Xerxes or his time. I didn't think anything new about the original sources, wasn't intrigued by anything. So maybe your experience would be different with this thing, but mine was lackluster. So I guess our Library of the Lost was all over the map today. Some of them are excellent, some of them are not. I will find a bunch of other books to talk about next time. But in the meantime, I'm going to wrap this up, but I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.